Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this very exciting graduate series masterclass with NYFA Alum Grand Jury Prize Sundance 2021 short film award-winning Akinola Davies. Akin is a former student of mine, a friend, and just a brilliant filmmaker. So you're in for a treat today. Just kind of give you an overview of how it will go. We're going to watch his short film, the award-winning film Lizard, which is also BAFTA nominated, which is about 18 minutes running time. And then I will repopulate the screen with Akin. We'll go over a few questions, and then we're going to invite special panelists, some of our current students who are studying with us now. So we're gonna start with the film, and I'll see you in a minute. But again, thanks for tuning in. It's going to be a great day. I'm very excited to present this to you all.
What thing you define for there? You this girl. It is okay to be angry.
All right. Well, if you just joined us, we just screened the 2021 Grand Jury Prize short film award-winning film Lizard by none other than Akinola Davies Jr., a NYFA alum, someone who I love my time teaching with him and just watching his career. And so I'd like to actually invite him to join me now. Akin, there you are, my man. Hey, yeah, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for taking the time to give back to the community and to share some of your wisdom.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you asking me to be here.
Absolutely, man. This is a big deal. This is number one. It's good to see you. We're just so proud of you. I mean, this is very exciting to win this award. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise, but it's sort of the best surprise ever, considering it's the first narrative short I ever written, and I think I attended NYFA like over 10 years ago. So it's been a process, basically. That's what I'd say.
Wow, we were younger men then.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, now you say this is your first one that you've done, and you win Sundance. Now you're going to put the wrong idea in people's heads. It doesn't work for all you students at home. It doesn't work that way for everybody.
Yeah, it really doesn't. That's why. Do you know what I mean? That's why I said it's really unexpected, because my primary objective was just to make a good film, and that was it. That was good enough for me. Like, a good film was good enough. I didn't really want to get too caught up in the festival ideas, because I was like, I'm always of the opinion that like the first thing you do won't be like amazing, and then you'll kind of grow into it. So I'm really lucky that I'd say the reason why Lizard maybe is what it is because there's been like a 10-year period since film school of like assisting and doing every job on set and just like having a lot of life experience from then, but fully knowing that like at some point I want to make a short, at some point I want to make another short and maybe another short, and then eventually make a feature. It's just, it's just learning the craft, really.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you a few questions as your old teacher, just to kind of talk about some of the visual strategy and some of the things that go into it. And we do have a panelist of students who are going to join us. I don't want to steal their thunder, so I won't ask you all of the questions. But I do want to talk about, just for me, when I watch the film, there are so many layers to it, right? And when I think about the complexity and just at the layers and the texture. And so it's such a strong visual style. I feel like you implemented a touch of movement in almost every frame, whether it's a little push in or a slight pull back. And the texture, the texture of the look of it, right? So the texture of locations, which I thought were brilliant, just the texture of the walls and the way light hit and the shadows, but also the texture of the medium itself. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm throwing a lot at you, I apologize, a little bit about the visual strategy, and then also some of the technical in regards to what you shot it on and why you made that choice?
Sure. So initially, like, I was my initial thought was to shoot digital, shoot Steadicam. I imagined it quite flowy and quite dreamy. But, I was really fortunate that we got Shabir Krishna on board, who's an amazing DP, who has a lot of experience. Equally, I'm predominantly used to shooting commercial work. So, there's no real motivation to move the camera. You just move it whenever you want, in some instances. And this, he kind of just said, like moving the camera is like the trick you have, and you shouldn't do it unless you feel really obliged to, unless you're trying to communicate something. So that was a really good grounding, because I had just really pulled back from a lot of my initial thoughts. And yeah, so we just kind of focused in on the photography, and my only sort of note to him was that, we're having this conversation about hierarchy and about social hierarchy and power structures. So I really wanted to do this contrast of light and dark, shadows and light, and where they sort of come together, and not be scared to like hide faces in shadows and do stuff like that. So that was kind of the mooring for what we did, and then the rest was like to give it this kind of human feel, which kind of was meant to be more handheld. Mm-hmm. And then I guess in terms of like texture, in terms of movement, in terms of texture, we decided to shoot on 16 millimeter, to my producer's panic, because initially the plan was to shoot digital, and then we had Shabir, then we lost Shabir, so we had to go through the stage of like getting a different DP. So we got this other amazing DP who kind of convinced us all to shoot on film, and his work on film was really strong. So he convinced us, we were sold, and then through unforeseen circumstances, he had to pull out. So I think we had about 4 DPs, about 3 of them pulled out. But by the halfway stage, we'd committed to film. We'd like got Kodak to give us the stock and stuff like that. So by the time we got Shabir back on board, he was like, "Oh, you're shooting on film? Yeah, I'm down." So he was in to do it. And we were really lucky. He brought on Christian Epps, who's like, gaffered like Selma and like Belly and like Hype Williams videos. So as soon as he mentioned Christian Epps, I was like, "Yeah, whatever he wants, we'll do it." And also Christian teaches in Lagos. He teaches a lot of the local lighting gaffer community over there. So he was already, I think he might have just done Black is King, but it was really under wraps. And so he was coming to Lagos to like do a few workshops. So it kind of, all the stars aligned for us really. And then yeah, lastly on texture is that I'd never really seen the Lagos I grew up in on celluloid. And I think celluloid, apart from it just being beautiful and pretty, it really gives you a sense of depth to the image, and I love digital, but I think the process of shooting on film will always win for me over digital, because shooting on film for me is a bit slower. It means you get to spend a little bit more time with all the technicians, all the HODs, and especially it being my first narrative short, I managed to spend more time with the cast, which I felt was like really important. As for movement, yeah, I'd made a music video a few years before, and every frame I would just digital zoom like 10% in, and because for me it just gives you a little bit more of that intensity. Mm-hmm. And I was like, speaking to my editor, I was like, we should try this 10% thing, because I'm really fond of it. And we tried it, and it's really subtle. So you're one of the few people who's actually ever brought it up. And so I'm glad you noticed. But yeah, it's just because I really wanted to just have this kind of intensity like all the time. Wow. Yeah, this kind of foreboding intensity all the time. But yeah.
Yeah, well, you could certainly feel that. And I think, at no point did the movement feel gratuitous. For me, it was a way of kind of like focusing my attention. And that leads me to the other point of it. So there was so much layers to it, but it was so atmospheric, right? I felt like you really created this atmosphere for me. And, of course that came from the visual strategy that you employed, but if you could also talk about, 2 things that I think are incredibly strong in here. Number one is pacing, right? The pacing of the storytelling. I felt there was never a moment where it was lacking detail or it was too much detail. And the time that I spent with Juwon really helped to build that relationship. So the pacing of the storytelling, and then the brilliant sound design. Again, talk about layers, right? I feel like almost in every scene, you're hearing a little bit of someone preaching in the background, but you're hearing, the original score, but then you're also hearing the ambient, like diegetic sound, and just creating such a rich layer, rich soundscape. And so for me, that created this incredible atmosphere. That with the brilliant lighting and the brilliant camera work. Anyway, you can tell I'm very excited. I'm throwing too much at you.
Yeah,
but
no. Like I said, it's nice to hear someone who like deconstructs film talk about it, because I only get to talk about it in passing with people who just like want to talk about the general themes. Everyone wants to talk about the lizard. Everybody always wants to talk about the lizard. So with pacing, you know what? I wouldn't even go as far as saying like I necessarily like mastered what I was doing. What I can say in terms of pacing is that like I knew there wasn't a huge amount of dialogue, because I tend to construct in images first and construct from pictures. And I think a lot of the pacing just came from the fact that like, all right, every, and then it maybe harps back onto like the 10-year period is like, okay, cool. Everything I do in terms of myself as a filmmaker, I always think of like the finances of filmmaking. So like for me, I've constructed this kind of dialogue with myself of like, every frame has to count. Everything needs to count for something, and even if there's no dialogue, like what information are we sort of giving? You just need to like offer little nuggets here and there so that there's nothing that just feels like gratuitous, like you said, and then I guess in the pacing for me, everything's kind of method as well. It's like growing up in Lagos, it's hot, it's kind of languid, it's kind of slow. But at the same time, when you get into the action, it's super fast paced, So I think that felt a lot more deliberate, that, we're just like with this character looking around and however long that takes, in a sense, that's what it takes, but equally not having really long sort of moments, because, you're still trying to pack it in. My producer wanted me to get it in under 15 minutes, but I was like, yeah, it is what it is. And then the sound design is probably one of my favorite parts after like production and after editing. Like I'm very obsessed with sound design. Probably, one of the people I assisted kind of taught me that you can forgive bad picture, but people forgive bad picture, but they won't forgive bad sound. And I've always sort of remembered that. And I was like, look, I want this to feel extremely visceral. And I remember speaking to CJ, who did a lot of the sound design. I can't remember what it was, but I'd listened to this kind of house song on my headphones, and they'd made this composition. Like when they played it, it felt like a different part of your brain was hearing it differently. And I remember being like, yeah, I want to kind of play with that as a thought. I don't want it to be just this kind of straightforward diegetic or whatever. I wanted it to feel very kind of at pace with what happens in a human's mind. I wanted some like heartbeats in there. I wanted the atmos to feel like a bit distorted and warped. I wanted it to feel as rich as the picture, basically. Yeah. And I remember in the first sound pass, I was like, okay, cool. We've got something fun here, basically. Yeah.
Well, you certainly achieved that and some. I was blown away by it. And as you speak, when you talk about being inspired or the method of it, having grown up in Nigeria, and that the pace of life, you could certainly feel that, right? And you could feel the heat, actually. Like when I'm watching, I'm actually feeling the heat as she's going through it. And, part of that is maybe just what the location provides, but also some of the brilliant lighting by Epps. I do want to bring the students on, but I have to ask one last question before I turn it over to them. And it goes into directing actors, and we can talk about castings. I know that was really important to you to cast locally. So I want to hear your, the thoughts on that. But I have to ask you about directing, and as it comes specifically to directing children. I think, your Juwon character, she had such a brilliant performance. And I'm laughing because, you know, when I teach a directing actors class, I'm oftentimes asked that, like, what do you do? How do you direct children? And my standard reply is always, don't, right? Just don't cast them. Don't do it. Get someone older who could look like they're playing younger. But you did such a brilliant job of it. So help me. So I can pass it on to my former student. What was that process like? And what was your technique?
Sure. You know what? I won't. There's no real secret to it, to be honest. Other than what I would say is the skill set of casting is probably something I've warmed to over a period of time. You know, I think that casting can really do a lot of the heavy lifting. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I think
I can.
Okay. Cool. You can, so long as you can hear me, it's good. So yeah, casting can do a lot of the heavy lifting. You know, I think that I don't ever go into anything knowing exactly what I'm looking for. I allow myself to sort of find it, and mainly it's because if you typecast or find someone that just feels like really natural, then it just works. It kind of takes a lot of the responsibility off you having to be like, hit this beat, because I personally don't know necessarily how to communicate that yet. And hopefully I'll keep learning as I go along. So with casting kids, it was interesting, you know. Originally it was written for 2 boys. The brothers were meant to be boys. And we saw some really great young male actors, but what they were doing is they were acting. It was quite evident that they were trying to act. And I'd seen this play maybe like a year before, which was an amazing play by this actor called Orenze Kane. It's like a one-man play, very physical, about Black masculinity and gentrification in London. And I'd heard his understudy was a woman. And I was like, wow, like that is a totally different play, like politically, thematically, everything, you know? So I kind of said, yeah, could we see what a couple of female actors would look like? And I saw the first one. I was like, oh, she's good. And the second was Panelists, who ended up being our lead. And I was like, boy, I don't know what I'm looking for, but she's got something, you know, like she just looks so, out of even all the adults we'd seen, she was the best. She was better than the adults. She was better than the kids. And she was just like really natural. And I'd been watching loads of Michael Caine's Acting 101 on YouTube. He has this like theater actors to act on camera. I'd watched that a couple of times. And he talks about always in the eyes for film. It's like, it's always in the eyes, how you use your brows, how you use your face. It's really subtle. It's never like, and she was just like, she was perfect. So I think with kids, I'm a big kid myself. So ultimately, I manifested a situation where we were playing, where I kind of like encouraged us to sort of play and not take it seriously. Like we spoke about what we had to do in terms of what she understood from the script, and then we kind of just played. You know, I was like, you know, just show me what you would do. I'll be the other character, or I'll be you to show her what to do. And it was hard because we cast a sister character who was the first girl we saw. And during the rehearsal, she was so disruptive, the sister character, that we had to like cut her. I was like, I can't have this around. She can't concentrate. So we need to find someone else for that role who can, you know, have a sense of maturity in what we're doing. I know I said we're playing, but at some point we need to stop playing, you know. And we managed to find who ended up playing the sister character, and she was brilliant as well. So it's, yeah, there's no real easy way, but I think it's just finding people who have the sort of right temperament, kids who have the right temperament, kids who are quite ambitious, and also who just like listen a lot. She listened a lot. She really listened a lot. And like by the end of it, we were like best friends walking around. She wanted to follow me around everywhere. And it was great because I didn't have to I didn't have to really direct her. I just said, we spoke about a scene. I'm like, this is in the car robbery scene, right? There was obviously a lot going on that I had to direct. And after the first take, it was quite overwhelming. And then she comes out of the van and she's crying. And I'm like, oh my God, what's up? Like, what's wrong? And she was like, no, I'm all right. I just thought I should cry. And I was like, okay, just do that every time, basically. You know? So yeah, she was a real, I heard the last thing I heard Arthur Jaffa speak to Khalil Joseph, and someone asked Khalil Joseph about, you know, would Khalil Joseph want to work with actors? And at the time he was like, oh, he's not sure. But the reason being is that he didn't feel he had the skill set to be able to like operate such an actor who's such a good tool, such a good instrument. And I kind of really empathize with that, because I think when you find a good actor, it can feel quite overwhelming. But literally, if you just cast someone who's like feels the part, looks the character, talks like the character, then that's quite a lot of heavy lifting done, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. Mike Nichols used to say that 90% of directing is casting. Right?
Yeah,
so
I'd agree with that for sure.
And I think you nailed it here with the Juwon character. As you speak, you know, the eyes, they did say so much. I'm thinking back now to the scene where she walks into the money counting room, right? And then we have that, you have that very close up or extreme close up, first where we see Jesus and then we see her eyes, and it pushes in, and you know, it's so communicative. And then of course, when she's in the back of the car during the crime, during the heist, again, you really feel that. It's so powerful. And it seems like she's doing nothing, but there's so much going on up there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just trust, you know, like, I think the thing with kids is that you have to kind of remember they're kids, you know, like they can't be on set for hours on end. They need breaks. You need to remember that, you know, with any actor, you need to remember they're also humans, you know? So like, I remember the first day she had a headache when we filmed her speaking to the security guard. She had a headache. We were in like 35-degree heat, felt like 38 degrees. And I was just like, look, she needs water, she needs a break. And however long she needs, that's what she needs, you know? I also never talked down to her. I never spoke to her like she was a kid. I also like asked her opinion on stuff and made her really feel like she was part of it. So I think the thing is like, you know, everyone's method's different, but for me, it's like, I'm really collaborative. And for me, having her like bless me with her performance was like so important, that I needed her to feel as secure in what she was doing, as respected. Because also in Nigeria, you know, like, you know, it's kind of, there's still a structure of like talking down to kids. Parents know best and adults know best. And she, you know, she's got a lot of acting under her belt, you know, she like won some child award or whatever. But I think this was the first film where she was really like treated, well, I mean, I don't know, but it felt like this was one of the first films where she was really like, everyone kind of like made a fuss over her. Everyone like made sure she was all right. Everyone made sure like whatever she needed. Like for example, the shoes were too small. So I was like, okay, when we're not shooting her feet, put her in trainers. You know, we don't need to make this situation for her any more difficult than it already is. So as best as possible, let's work with what the needs of everyone to get the best thing, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah, just creating that director-actor relationship. Well, Akin, I'd love to sit here and just you and I geek out talking about film and talking about, you know, your beliefs about it and what went into this. But to be fair, we're going to invite the student panelists on now, because I know that they have a myriad of questions to ask of you. So I will turn it over to them. But again, man, just so great being with you. Great seeing you. I'm going to be here the whole time and still moderating, and maybe we'll get a minute to chat at the end, but I'd like to invite the students to the stage, if you will.
How's it going?
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Nice to meet you too.
So this is where I'm going to actually shut up and let you all just go ahead and have a way with that. Ask Akin some questions about his career, the projects, whatever it may be that you would like to ask. And thanks for joining us, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Hi, Jose. Hi, Ina. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Jada. Hi, Robert. Hi, Benjamin. I can't see the lady in the black laptop's name, but hi.
Hello, I'm Laura. I have a question. Like, I was wondering about this. Like, filming, it never goes like as planned. Like, something always happens, it comes up. Was there any major like situation that might have arisen that like kind of like threw a monkey wrench into things during the filming?
Oh yeah, there was a few of those. So we shot on film in Lagos, 16 millimeter in Lagos. So there's no labs, no African countries, at least to my knowledge, stock film. So we had to fly it in from London. So we had like 20 rolls. So we like apportioned like a few rolls per scene. So when it came to like, we shot across 4 days. After the second day, we were like, it's pretty tight on rolls. So like, what happens if we run out? So there was like a huge debacle of like trying to get more rolls through, and then like they got stuck in customs, and there was like this long hoo-ha, and a couple of producers cried and stuff like that. So that was pretty tense. Also, we wanted to get a pickup shot, which we didn't quite get, because like there's so many moving parts. It was hard to get things back, and the production designers struggled to like get people to come back because they wanted more money, and we didn't have more money and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of that, which was quite testing. You know, we had to stage a church with about like almost 200-300 extras, and you know, we're running a little bit behind, so they weren't best pleased having to wait so long. So I felt like a politician. I had to go in there and like say hi to everyone, like, hey, I'm the director, have some water, have some Coca-Cola, how you doing? Nice to meet you. You're gonna be great, you look amazing. So there was like a lot of that. But yeah, I don't know. I come back to that 10-year thing that I've done, is that like a lot of what I've done as a Black filmmaker means I haven't necessarily had a lot of access to resources. So what I've had to do is ensure that I'm quick on my feet with problem solving, and equally that I'm quick on my feet with like how to be diplomatic in situations where like problems arise. You know, like not a lot will always go your way. So you kind of have to you either have to be like really creative in your problem solving, or you just have to accept that that's what this film is meant to be. You know, I think for me, I'm quite I'm quite chilled. You know, I'm just like, look, if that's what it is, that's what it is. You know, like no one knows any better. I'm the only one who knows the script. I'm the only one who knows the story. And if I'd wanted this to be like a techno crane shot and we have to do it on a tripod from a staircase, then, and you know, the techno crane's in here, then that's kind of what it needs to be. You know, I try and be as fair as possible based on the situation. So yeah, stuff goes wrong all the time, but it's you just have to kind of not get stressed out and just embrace every what am I trying to say? Embrace every sort of mishap as a different sort of opportunity that you may not have forecast for yourself.
Hi, I'm Ina. I'm from the documentary department. So first off, I'm Nigerian, so this is so refreshing, you know. Talking about Lizard, so when I watched the film, it was just amazing, because first off, I saw the 50 naira note, like the old one, the 10 naira. I was like, oh shit, like this is real. Yeah. And nobody in Nigeria who grew up in Nigeria, you know, every one of us, it's like a rite of passage. Yeah, you definitely have to use your offering money to get something. So all of that was very authentic to me, because, you know, we talk about, you know, not having a lot of representation in the films we see out there. You know, sometimes it's like they're giving you like an old Lagos setting, but you know, that's not it. That's not the Lagos, you know, or that's not the Abuja or Port Harcourt or whatever. So for me, that was really important. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
We are currently, in my department, we're currently about to film cinema verite films. So basically it's like creating scenes. And I would want to ask you, how do you pick those scenes that you know, because this is a short film, but you were still able to do a lot with it. So how do you go about picking those scenes that you know will make this story? Like, how do you narrow it down to the actual scenes? Because that would really help me, and I'm sure my colleagues as well.
That's a quite a hard question, I'd say. The best way to answer it is to be aware of your intention of what you're trying to do. That's probably the best thing, and then it's kind of working around it. So I've done what I would consider maybe like a couple of documentaries, and so I did this documentary about Fela Kuti, and it's called One Day Go Be One Day. So I'd read up all about it, and I'm like, like, where do you start? Like, how long is a piece of string? His story's been told like so many times. But I was like, okay, well, what's important to me as a filmmaker? Like, what are my sensitivities? And I was like, I'm very sort of like family orientated. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I should film his family. Maybe I should interview his family. So that was kind of the first point of call. But then equally, I was like, he also has these seminal album covers. So maybe I could recreate some of those. And then you kind of end up with like different ideas and different images of what to create. And then there was a certain amount of mythology. So I guess I start with intention. And I think, for example, with Lizard, I started with the robbery. That was the catalyst. And then I worked my way back. And I was like, okay, cool. If that's the end of the film, what's the beginning of the film? Because it can't be action packed throughout. So it's like, for me, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Like I want to take you on a journey. I want you to see that this character sees a whole bunch of things that they don't understand, right? And each of those things can be like very detailed. Some of them might not, even her using the bathroom, like that kind of skips over a lot of people's minds. But to me, there's this turn of phrase where it says like godliness is next to cleanliness or something like that. So I was like, it's important that when I used to go to church, the bathrooms were always disgusting. So I was like, oh, okay. Do you know what I mean? So like, it meant a lot to me to put that in. I remember even in the development, they were like, like, what's the point of this scene? And I was like, it means something to me, so it needs to be in there. So yeah, I mean, I don't know necessarily how to answer that question, but I would say that I really focus on the method, right? So it's like, what images help me construct either the philosophy of what I'm saying, or like having a conversation with what I'm saying in one way or another. Like I picked the bathroom, there's no dialogue, but she says, yuck, disgusting, so that kind of alludes to the fact that like it's not the best place, and it's really subtle. It's not like a big sort of moment, Then I guess if she's by herself in those scenes, I was like, well, you hear these omnipresent voices around the whole time, but she's alone, she's alone in this big space the whole time. So, and then there's like shadows being cast, so it's this thing of light and dark again. It's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the photography is half my imagination, half the cinematographer's imagination. I send a lot of references. I work from a lot of photography, and we just kind of find what is having conversation with the theme of what we're doing. Sometimes with verite, with documentary, I guess sometimes you might not find it, but if I come back to the Fela Kuti thing again, we know that for the period of I was making a film, he was very into like traditional Yoruba mythology. So we were like, we need to go and film in this Oshun sacred forest, for example, and we needed to get the matriarch sort of dancing around because he was very influenced by his mum. So there's just like, you're just making these little connections and you're putting them in this place, and then you're just trying to see if it fits together, I guess, basically. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's kind of how I think. But yeah, but thank you for the question.
Hey, how's it going? I wanted to ask a question about Lizard. There's something that I saw throughout, and I thought it was really, really purposeful and really well done. It's this feeling that she's like walking through like her own mind almost, right? Like while she's like navigating through these hallways, and it's like she's trapped within this kind of oppressive system of the church, right? And I was wondering, when you were coming with these image systems, like with the pillars and all the lines and like the long hallways, was that planned out for you in the script beforehand, or was it something that kind of adapted into the location after you found it?
it was very much in the script. I storyboard quite a lot. I'm quite obsessed with storyboarding. So I draw my own storyboards and then I show them to everyone and they're like, there's 100 images there. Like, this is a 15-minute film or something. So then it's like a process of elimination of like how to get from A to B. Because for me, like, because I hadn't done a narrative, like I'm very into like the construction of a film. Like, okay, how does this cut together without shooting a single frame? I need to make sure it kind of fits together, or we shoot anything. But yeah, the corridors were always there. And then in looking for a location, I was like, okay, I'm looking for a place with loads of corridors. I'm looking for a place that has this kind of juxtaposition of where you can let a lot of light come through, as opposed to a place that's just totally dark. You know, it's kind of like playing with the best of both worlds. And even the location we had, it wasn't my first choice. Like, I wanted to shoot in my original church, but that I used to go there in like 97, and like we shot this in 2020. So like the church has got like air conditioning. It's like super fancy now, you know, it's got like carpets and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, yeah, we can't shoot here. Like, you know, we look like we're in like America for all intents and purposes. So we had to find somewhere that was a bit untouched, and it looked a bit more like a school than like a church from what I remember. But it looked like my boards, you know. It looked like those corridors were meant to be inside. I remember in one of the drafts I wrote like a fluorescent lights like flickering or something, but I was like, we're outside, there's no fluorescent lights outside, basically. So yeah, so I don't know, I'm super collaborative, but I'm very specific, because I know from experience, the more I have an idea of stuff, the easier it is for other people to interpret. Equally, the easier it is for other people to like want to throw a suggestion. And then, like I said before, I'm quite malleable when it comes to location. I'm quite malleable when it comes to like situation being 100% sort of perfect, like the Laura asked. But like most of that in the boards, basically. Hi, Mani, nice to meet you.
Hi, so I'm Jada. I'm in the screenwriting department. One thing, when it was like the ending, I was just like, oh my God, I want more. So it was just so great, because instantly I was just hooked from beginning to end, and I just love it. So it just made me so curious to like read the screenplay and like think like what was going on in your mind, like writing it, especially during the church scene, because I used to go to church a lot because I went to a church school when I was younger. So like when I was watching the scene of the girl going in and then listening to the pastor and everything, I felt like I was at church, and I was just like, oh my God, he really wrote that. Like, I was like, wow, I wonder if he like got some notes from a pastor or something. But it was like I was dived into that. I was really like not drive. I'm not using my words correctly, but it's okay. But like, I was just very curious on like how you wrote that scene, like how when like the congregation stood up, it was starting to sing and she was backing up, and like everything was starting to get a little bit hazy, and the close-ups and everything. So I'm really curious how you got everything down on the paper.
Sure, thanks. I'm glad you're really into it. I'm glad you wanted more as well. That's always a good sign. So Lizard is based on a true story. Like everything apart from a giant lizard and seeing one of the pastors in a merchandise room with someone in the church happened. So a lot of it's based on memories. It's just me mining memories, and me being as much of like a detailed sort of obsessive person as I am, or I realized I am. And basically, you know, I am very much, you know, I went to church a lot, you know, I don't necessarily identify as a Christian anymore, but like I still have a lot of romance for those spaces. I still have a lot of like anchor and grounding in those spaces, whether or not I believe them or not anymore. There's still a nostalgia. There's still like a certain level of like what was that all about, that like that goes on in my mind. And I think sort of mining memories is just what I remember service being like. I just kind of wrote what I remember. I wrote the people were in this kind of devotion, because I don't know if anyone, you know, I guess some of you have been to like Pentecostal, like Black churches, like it's real, you know, it's like the theater, the drama of those places. I remember I'd always try and sneak into the grown-ups church because the Sunday school was really boring. And in the grown-ups church, the choir would always sing and they would always kill it, and they would have their robes and they'd look amazing. Or like someone would like, the Holy Ghost would come in someone and start talking like they're Jesus. And you're like, is everyone's cool with this, right? Like we're all, you know? And it was just like those things that it's just how I remember it, to be perfectly honest. It just felt like that's what, to be really honest, I didn't want to create like any sort of caricature of it. I wanted to like show what Black praise and worship looked like. I wanted people who had never seen this or never experienced it in an African context to see what it's like in an African context, without trying to, you know, Pentecostal church is obviously derived from like Black American church or whatever, evangelical church, but it's its own thing, you know, like the preacher with his suit, sweat soaked through, like that's what it's like, you know. People sweating, like people fainting, people like, you know, talking to each other. There's a huge reverence of like call and response as well. Yeah, I mean, it, you know, it sounds really weird to say, but like I always thought screenwriting, and I still do, writing a script is probably the most difficult thing to do in the filmmaking process. I think that like screenwriters are like crazy people. I don't know how they do it, basically, because it's like there's just so, it's such an art form, you know. Like I struggle. I write on my phone because I can't sit on my computer and type out a script. So I type it on my notes, and then I take it from my notes, and then I format it in final whatever draft, whatever it's called, you know. But ultimately, when I know I have to sit there and write something, I just can't do it. So I would just like type it out, and I write like I think, you know. What I realize is like knowing myself is I'm super hypersensitive. I'm really like attuned to what the feeling of what's happening is, as opposed to like what someone might be particularly saying. I'm more like locked into the feeling. Like I'm like, what is this feeling like? You know, that's for me like the main thing I'm trying to get across in every picture. I'm like, if this was just stills, you know, if this was like mise en scène, like what is it saying? Like what am I trying to communicate here? And for me, like, you know, I guess going back to your question, Benjamin, or your question, Inner, it's like I'm really focused on an image being able to tell multiple stories at the same time just from looking at it. You know, if you never saw anything else, you'd be like, oh, well, this story is like, this image is quite dramatic. There's like loads of light and dark. There's like someone who's very small in the frame and everything looks kind of big, you know, like it's just constantly having those conversations, because I like to be very efficient with what I'm doing, and you know, just maybe for right or wrong, I just think as a Black filmmaker, I haven't always had the privilege to just do like these like floral, beautiful constructions. So I have to be very efficient with like exactly what I'm doing, you know. But yeah, I mean, to come back to your question, it was just writing a very honest depiction of what I remember my childhood to be like, you know. I wrote it, I sent it to my brother and my cousin who were in the van with me when the robbery happened, and they were like, damn, we can't believe you remember it so clearly, you know, like, because we've never spoken about it before. And they were like, just all the details were so like spot on, apart from a few bits I kind of added in there, you know, but yeah. But yeah, good luck being a screenwriter. It's a tough job.
Would it be crazy if I asked you what happened at the end, since you like know the full story? Because when in the film, when her aunt like stormed off, you know, and she was like, Olokba, you know, kind of like, we have been the other police guy, and he goes, you know, you're not supposed to bring out your gun, because we know what happens, you know, when when they find out the police officer is in the foot. Am I allowed to ask that question? Just out of
You're allowed
curiosity.
to ask it. I don't know if I would necessarily answer it, but I mean, what I tend to say is, whatever you think happened, really. Like, whatever you are as an individual will determine the outcome of the film, because I think I really hate delivering stuff to people. I hate being like, oh, this is exactly what happened, you know, because those aren't the sort of films I like, and those aren't the sort of filmmakers I sort of like. I like being very generous, and I like my audience to feel very active in the story. I want people to be like, oh, you know, like if someone's like, oh, if someone says like, oh, we saw corruption, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I didn't necessarily say that was corruption, because it's the point of view of an 8-year-old girl. She doesn't know if she's seeing corruption or not. She's just seeing stuff happen which she doesn't necessarily understand, you know? Like the guy and the woman in the merchandise room, they weren't, in the first iteration of the script, I wrote that they were making out. But I'm like, if you put they're making out, then it's very specific to what they're doing, you know? And I was like, I don't want to be so specific. I want you to feel like it's enough to suggest without being fully like, nail your colors to the mast. And for me, I like to be really suggestive. I like the audience to sort of play along. So that's my diplomatic answer. But for you, Inna, because you're Nigerian, my aunt was the police commissioner. So I don't think the robbery was, I don't think it was planned. I think it was very fortuitous that they robbed the wrong people, you know? And she got us out of the van, she got us into another car, and she went after them. And I literally only found out last year, and mind you, this is like however many years later, I only literally found out last year that they got caught 2 weeks later, and she got her bag back basically. But I don't really know what happened beyond that. So there's a little insider trading for you basically. But, yeah.
She was like so upset. I could feel like she was like, like you messed with the wrong lady today.
Yeah.
But another question. I'm sorry, guys. So you literally were in our position 10 years ago, because I was gonna ask you, but thank God Jonathan, you know, mentioned that. And right before every project, every film, you know, we've had to make, or I've had to make. And it's so crazy because during our orientation, they did talk about it, and that is self-doubt. And before coming to NYFA, I've been a practicing journalist in Nigeria for 4 years. I work with AIT. And, you know, for me, this is new. I'm editing, and it's crazy. I don't even want to talk about how Resolve is, oh my God. And they're telling me I have to use another software next semester. I'm like, okay, you know, but right before every project is like, oh my God, can I do this? So the whole self-doubt thing comes. And what advice would you give to someone like me? Because it's incredible, you know, what you've been able to achieve. And I also like the fact that you said, you know, you've after school, after NYFA, you know, you've gone on to like do internships, you know, you've been building your craft. And it kind of like gave me hope, like, oh my God, calm down, slow down. So what else would you say to me and to students who are going through this? Because I don't think I'm the only one, but it's fine if I'm the only one. But, you know, because sometimes it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. What can I say about self-doubt? We can be here all night if we want to talk about that. So I think I remember I wanted to skip my visa and I wanted to stay in America. That was my plan after NYFA. I was gonna, like, you know, I think I'd fallen in love with an older lady. I was like, cool, this is me done. I'm gonna be out here just like, you know, being an illegal immigrant or whatever. And it didn't work out, you know, so I had to come back to London. I was like basically sleeping on a friend's couch for 6 months. And I was just like, what? I have to get a job, you know, like I've just had this beautiful experience in NYFA. My confidence really been built. And now it's like back to reality. It's sort of like, you know, I have to go work at like American Apparel in the stockroom, you know, for like 6 months or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it kind of wanes on you. But I think the difference is, and the question that I always ask myself is like, you know, how committed am I? And it's a conversation that's been going on during this period is like, how committed am I to wanting to do this filmmaking thing, you know? And for me, it's always like, yeah, like there's no plan B, like I'm gonna do this, you know? And I think that it's kind of giving yourself palatable expectations, because I think if you come out of NYFA, even if you make like, even if you smack out of the park, you know, like I always think that you're gonna have in the interim, unless you're like super lucky, like you're gonna have a lot more down days than like positive days to begin with, you know. You're gonna have a lot of like setbacks to begin with, you know. You're gonna make stuff that you think is great initially, and then you start making, and you're like, this is trash, you know. But I think that ultimately it's just having that commitment to like learning the craft, because it's a craft, you know. The more you do it, the better you get, you know. It kind of sounds very sort of like old-fashioned or whatever, but and then I would say for maybe like the Black filmmakers in the room is that like ultimately like you also have the like added advantage of maybe like culturally, you know, like your family or your friends are like, what are you doing, man? Like go get a real job or whatever. And you're like, nah, man, I want to pursue this sort of art thing that doesn't pay like very much money. So once again, it's that commitment. And you just, and I say palatable because like I had to go and get experience, because I had to go and work for other people. I had to try and be on as many sets as possible. And I try to do that in the conventional route by getting into production companies. And, you know, early 2010, like not many like Black production assistants were getting jobs in London. So I ended up going to go and work for these sort of like artists who were making like content online, you know. And that's what I did for 5 years. I worked for them. I camera operated, I produced, I edited all their films, all their videos. You know, I like, you know, I was production assistant, I was runner, I was this, I did everything, you know, like you name it, I've done it on a set basically. And I think that just kind of, for me, I did that because it humbled me a lot, even though at times I was like, oh, I could do this better, but it humbled me a lot because I was like, you know what, like some jobs are going to be great and you're going to have like celebrity on set. Some jobs are going to be like terrible and you're all going to be sharing a cup of coffee together and a biscuit, you know, like, but at the end of the day, like, I just remembered that like, well, whether it's good, whether it's bad, I love this, you know, I want to, this is what I want to do. Like, no matter like how shitty the experience is, like, to me, it's still a worthy experience, because as a filmmaker, as a writer, like everything I did or everything I do is just like, what do they call it? It's what's that stuff? It's like work experience. Everything's work experience, you know. Every feeling's work experience. Every situation's work experience. And I think as a filmmaker, like the goal is to become an empath, because I feel like if you become an empath, you understand more how to tell a story, how people might be feeling within a story. So I just took every opportunity that sort of came my way. And when I kind of got really annoying and outgrew my position, and people tried to like tell the directors I was doing what to do, they were like, yeah, you should probably go and shoot your own stuff now, you know, you could probably do it, you know, at least go and if you want to smoke like that, if you want that much responsibility, then go and do it. You know, you've built a network, you've met people, you're likable, you know this, you know a little bit about lighting, all this stuff. So yeah, go do it. And after about 6 years, you know, even then I was very emotional and I felt like they were just like ditching me. I went and I put all that negativity, all that self-doubt, all of that into one of the first films I ever made. And I remember showing the guy I assisted, and he cried. He was like, yeah, man, you're good. You don't need us anymore. And that kind of lifted my confidence again. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to do this. And even after that, I was like, yeah, my phone's going to be like off the hook. I'm going to get jobs. And even after that, it was like crickets, you know. I just like, for about another 4 years, you know, it took about 4 years to get to the point of making Lizard. So it's like, even after every small success, you always kind of reminded what to do. I'm going to be really cheesy, right? I always remember 8 Mile, right? And I always think of myself as the Eminem character, because, and the only bit I claim is after he'd won that last battle, he went back to work. That's like my motto to a T. Like, even after, like, you know, I'd rather like go back to my studio or go back to work than like drink champagne with everyone and celebrate, you know, whatever we're supposed to be celebrating, because like all that stuff for me is cool, but like I love filmmaking. You know, it was the best decision I ever made in my life, you know, like emotionally, spiritually, confidently. Like NYFA, even though it was a short period and it was a 3-month course and it was way expensive than I even imagined, it kind of, I just found something I was good at, and I just found something I loved, and I found people who like encouraged me. I remember Adam Yaffe, who like, I don't know if he's still there, but he was there at the time, and he was like, after I showed the film I made, he was like, that's the magic of cinema. And I just like those little things really sort of like built my confidence. So I was, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess in addition, also having the community of people you work with now, all these people in the room or people in your class, you're all a community to like lean on each other and offer each other advice. And when things aren't going good, you know, I think this is a real good opportunity to just start building the sort of filmmaking family that you want for yourself, is what I would say as well. Any more questions, or is Inna gonna ask all the questions for you guys? Because I know she will as well, basically.
I was gonna ask how long you guys were in pre-production and what that kind of process was like, of going from script to actually your first day on set. Sure, quite a while, to be honest. So it wasn't necessarily conventional, because I haven't made a narrative before, but from when I wrote the first story, I wrote it in like January 2019, and then we wrote the dialogue in May 2019, and then we went back and forth with the development guys at BBC, and we got a sign off in September 2019. So we were supposed to shoot in October 2019, but like felt a bit rushed. You know, we had to cast, we had to location scout and everything. So we decided to shoot in January 2020. So I was like, this is really important to me. So I'm going to go to Nigeria in December. I went in December 2019. So I was there for about, you know, I wanted to be about 6 weeks or 8 weeks ahead of production. So I went and just kind of like acclimatized. You know, I started meeting all HODs, you know, started meeting like anyone I could meet and who could be involved, casting, costume, makeup, you know, and locations and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, and then Christmas holiday happens. So you have like 2 weeks of just like everything goes down the pan because you've been partying for 2 weeks. But I think I'd done all the groundwork initially for as long a period of time, just to alleviate my anxiety, because I was like, yo, like I've never done this before. These white people are giving me all this money to do this stuff. I don't want to balls up this opportunity. I want to show up for myself. So as much time as I need, I'm just gonna make that for myself. So yeah, I think we had like a production meeting like about a week before, and then we had like rehearsals and production meetings like 4 days before, and then we shot for 4 days. So it was on the clock, you know, it was quite a short period. We probably had about 10 days front to back, you know, maybe like 4 days prep, 1 day rest, 4 days shoot, you know, and everyone went their separate ways. So it was quite tight, but I gave myself as much time as I needed on the front of it, because I knew there was a lot I needed to do. So I gave myself probably about 6 weeks before that just to get my house in order, basically. Come on, Matthew, you're a bit shy. Matthew, Imani, Jose, what you got for me?
I mean, you call me out now, so now I've got to say something, haven't I?
Oh, he's got a British accent. Woo!
Birmingham represent.
Hey,
all right, so yeah, I'll ask you this one then. So like, obviously, this is such an autobiographical story, and you have like such a autobiographical feel to this. Like, what's one thing when you were transcribing this and making a film about it, what's like one thing you really wanted the audience to take away from this experience to happen to you? Because this is obviously something that you've lived with, but while the audience can perceive and kind of have these theories about like what happened and how to kind of see it, what is one thing you're like, oh, I just want this to be the take, one small thing even that's a takeaway for you personally?
Sure. It's kind of what Jada alluded to, that she wanted more. Like, I wanted there to be no resolution, because I think for often enough kids on the continent, whenever they experience trauma, there is no resolution. Or maybe even Black kids in maybe in America or whatever, there's never really resolution to a lot of these things. You know, I think maybe in the last 10, 20 years, conversations around like therapy and counseling have become a lot more normalized, but certainly for kids on the continent, that's still not a normalized conversation. So I remember in the development meetings, they were like, yeah, but like, how does this end? Like, what are we saying? And I was like, so I don't know what I'm saying. Like, I kind of had the strength of mind of having this like 10-year period to just be like, yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is. Like, I don't know what the outcome is. So just as much as I don't know, I don't want the audience to have an outcome to this, you know? I want there to feel like there's no resolution to it. I want people to like, be like, really? Is that the end? Like what? Like how, you know? But yeah, I remember having to sort of like fight my corner for that, and for a 10-foot lizard as well. I really had to sort of fight for that, because that was important to me, because in terms of African storytelling, a lot of the greats, we have, it was quite folklorish. Like, you know, the lizard for me is like a folklore sort of tale where like the sort of like natural and the human world kind of blend into one, and there isn't this kind of hierarchy in whatever, you know, like everyone's a character. Jonathan was asking about location before. For me, location is a character, and it's such an important character, because it's where you know, I speak to like my mom a lot about geography, and I say geography and location has a specific emotional trigger for each different person. So to not honor a location as a character just felt like missing a trick, because every room, you know, the room you live in, like you have memories in that room, you know? So like for me, it felt important to like, just in the cutaways, like we are just showing that this place, not only does it have character, but it is a character, you know? Yeah, just, I think those things for me were really important, because in terms of like trying to hear my voice as a filmmaker, I think, especially in a short, like I'm more open to just trying things that feel like me, as opposed to things that feel like film, or trying to tell a film, basically. And I'm happy to live and die by those choices as well.
I mean, they're great choices.
Oh, cheers. Thanks, man.
Nice. We probably have time for one more question. Jose, do you have a question? Or Imani?
We could squeeze one for each if they both have one. Jose's they both got good teeth and their smiles are good, so they both got a good question.
I mean, I don't have any question. It's just more than I would like to thank you for, you know, telling us your story from these 10 years work, because I think it's something that it's hard to keep in this industry with the hope, right? Because you never know when you're gonna get your chance to do your film. Right now, me and my colleagues here are about to graduate, and we don't know whether we're gonna make a new short in 1 year, in 2 years, you know. So I think it's very inspiring, your story. So thank you so much for telling us.
No worries, you're welcome. Yeah, it's just that thing. It's like nothing is a quick fix, you know. Like you just, if you're committed to being a filmmaker, then however long it takes, you know. Like I imagine all of you, like, you know, you feel like you have stories to tell, and you feel like you're the best people to tell those stories. So I think with every story, the more life experience you have, the better the story, you know, because ultimately you would have an expanse of what it is to really live and also see from a different point of view. So even if it doesn't happen in the short term, even if you get panned, even if however many doors they get shot on you, just like, do you know what I mean? I feel like, you know, even if you don't have the resources, man, just keep making stuff, you know, whether it's on your mobile phone or whether it's you're just putting stuff up on YouTube, you know. I think like ultimately just practice makes perfect. So just keep going, you know.
That's right.
Waiting for you, Imani. I know you got something for me.
I don't have any specific questions, but I did want to just say thank you. It's nice to hear from someone who's been successful, especially since I just started my program in January. So it's like, it's hard to see how this is going to be in the future, I guess. So it's nice to just hear from someone else who has experience and things like that.
Oh, you're totally welcome. And yeah, just don't be too hard on yourselves, really. Don't beat yourselves up. Don't be too hard on yourselves. Like, you know, embrace every failure you have and every mistake as like a lesson, you know. I don't see any negative as like a bad thing. I think it's a lesson, you know, like, oh yeah, you fucked up. Oh, you kicked over the tripod. Don't do that. But do you know what I mean? If it happened, you know, you learn, you won't make that mistake again. You know, it's better to kind of feel safe enough to make mistakes with collaborators than to feel like you have to get something perfect all the time. Because like, you know, perfection is also subjective, you know, but at the end of the day, like, so long as you feel like you've learned from that experience, so long as you've shown up for yourself, so long as like, if you come into something and you're like, I know all the answers, and you leave still knowing all the answers, then you haven't really learned anything, you know. But if you go into something with a certain amount of vulnerability, with a certain amount of like anxiousness, but just being really honest, being really transparent about the mistakes you've made, ask loads of questions, leverage the community around you, like speak to everyone, work with people you trust, and work with people who like you know, this is something that I probably should have said earlier, but I only ever really work with people who I want them to give me a certain amount of them. I don't just work with people because they have a big name or because like they're really successful. I work with people and I want them to contribute. I don't want them to come and just do something that I'm telling them to do. You know, it's like, if there's someone whose work I'm referencing, instead of trying to copy it, I just ask that person to work on my project, you know? And I think like, if they say no, then you find somewhere else, you know? And I just think like, there's no real right or wrong, you know? But the more you keep going at it, like the more confident you'll be in what you do. But yeah, thank you all. Good questions.
Yeah, thank you, students. And Akin, thank you so much. I mean, along the lines, you know, it seems like we were talking about having self-doubt, having fear, being nervous going into it. And I'd like to share with everybody a quote of yours that I read that I think is brilliant. So I'm going to read it so I don't butcher it. Being brave is critical to me as a storyteller. If I'm not scared, then I'm not challenging myself. And that really, you know, that really touched me. And I wanted to share that with everybody. And thank you for, you know, again, thank you for coming out today. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your voice. You know, we're proud as hell of you, man. And we look forward to seeing what the future holds, because we know it's bright.
You're welcome, man. I appreciate being asked to do this, you know, and I just seen the Q&A. So just real quickly, for like asked the question of like, how do you win Sundance? How do you plan to win it? It's like, you don't really and truly, like, you can't plan to win a festival. Just make the best thing that you want to make. And if it gets recognized, it gets recognized. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Awards are quite political inherently, you know, like there's a lot of politics behind it. And if you network and you work with the right people, if you want to play that sort of game, you'll figure it out. But really, you want to show up for yourself. You want to make the best thing possible for yourself. If it gets awards, it gets awards. If it doesn't, you're still proud of what you made. And that's kind of all that really matters. But yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you guys. Pleasure to meet you all.
Talk to you soon, man. Thank you, students. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.